Financial Markets Index a pour objectif principal d'aider les investisseurs en général, et surtout les investisseurs internationaux, dans la décision d'investissement sur le continent africain. D'accord ? Mais aussi, il a aussi un autre intérêt, c'est d'aider les policy makers et les market participants dans leurs discussions pour accélérer les réformes sur l'économie. L'indice donc produit un classement sur les différents pays en fonction de divers piliers sur les marchés financiers. Donc il y a 6 piliers qui sont discutés. Et donc à partir de là, on regarde quels sont les points, ça permet de discuter, de savoir un peu quels sont les specific areas où les market participants doivent se focaliser pour développer le marché.
Looking at the overall results, we have the South Africa coming on top, as is also the case in last year's results, even though South Africa has dropped on some of the index pillars. So last year it was topping all 6 pillars. This year Kenya has overtaken it in pillar 2 and Nigeria in pillar 3. And then it's a big gap from South Africa, that is 93. And then we have quite a big cluster in the 50s and 40s, so the index is ranked out of 100. So looking at the overall performance of Mauritius and how it's comparing also to last year, because as was mentioned, this is the second edition of the index, so we can see what the progress has been. Mauritius was ranking second last year, so it's fallen 2 places, now it's 4th. In terms of its overall score, it was 66 last year, it's now 62, so not much of a difference there, but still it has dropped some places in some of the pillars, especially pillar 2 and pillar 4. So starting with the first pillar, market depth. This is one where we see great diversity across the markets that we look at. So there's only 3 economies that have, for example, over 100% of market capitalization to GDP. And these are South Africa, Botswana, and Ghana. Mauritius does very well there at around 90%. Second pillar on access to foreign exchange. In the case of Mauritius, there are no capital controls. It has a relatively flexible exchange rate. What is the issue is in terms of the lack of interbank foreign exchange turnover. And Mauritius ranking quite low in that particular metric, $1.2 billion compared to third pillar in market transparency and the tax and regulatory environment. This is where Mauritius ranks quite well. It's 4th, so in line with its overall performance in the index. But as you can see on the chart, there's not that big differences from the first country to the 4th country. They tend to be all scoring quite well in this indicator.
On the next pillar, which is the pillar that measures the capacity of local investors, South Africa comes out quite strongly, and then there is Namibia, there is Morocco, and then everyone else has a very low capacity. And you can see the mark for Mauritius as well, which stands quite low. And one of the things that has come out in the index is the fact that when you come to Mauritius, even though the public sector or the government pension funds seem to be very strong and very big in its capacity, when it comes to the private sector side of pension and asset under management, it is quite small. When it comes to pillar 5, which talks about macro-economic opportunities, Mauritius probably is the second country on the continent where MPC disclosure is actually way up there, because you talk about voting patterns, you talk about members and what goes through their mind, which is really an example that the continent needs to follow. And you can see that come through the maps for Mauritius. It talks about macroeconomic standards, which again Mauritius does very well. But then the last pillar really talks about the guarantee and certainty that investors have around financial market contract. And this also came out as a very strongly recommended pillar by investors. And again, luckily for Mauritius, you stand tall across most of the pillars or most of the sub-pillars that are measured there. When it comes to insolvency framework, from a financial markets contract perspective, Mauritius comes out as one of the strong countries.